Have you ever hired the wrong person? Do you want to avoid that in the future? We know that hiring the wrong person costs you time and money and schedule and production and a host of other tangible and intangible resources. We also know that hiring the wrong person is a symptom of not recognizing which patterns are required for successful performance of specific tasks. What if there was a way to avoid hiring the wrong person? I've got a solution for you, but first, let me tell you my story because my work history, my education, and my consulting experience have put me in a unique position to teach you how to hire those right persons in the future. I'm Roger Bailey. I'm in my late 70s, and since 1962, when I graduated from high school, I've worked and consulted and taught throughout the Americas and Europe. In 1962, I joined the U.S. Navy as an electronics technician and served until 66. After the Navy, I worked at IBM from 66 until 80, when I left to start my consulting career. At IBM, I started as an electronic technician repairing card punch machines, and over the years, I ended up as a senior programmer analyst working on IBM's most popular mainframe operating system, virtual machines. During those years at IBM, I earned a BS in anthropology and an MS in counseling, and I have additional postgrad studies in linguistics. How could I possibly have information about how to avoid hiring the wrong person? Well, it's because of my computer hardware and software experience, my academic studies, and my work in linguistics, and also because I know how our human brains are operating like computers. I've developed a model, a process, a system for understanding and predicting human behavior and performance. And my model helps managers hire the right person and then train, motivate, and influence them so that they deliver the results their companies want from them and keeps them happy and productive. Let me give you a peek under the covers of my approach. Every time a person speaks, they give us clues about how their brain operates. These clues show us their functional brain architecture. For instance, we know that some folks focus on what is working and other folks focus on what is not working. Toward and away from are common labels for these particular brain functions. Toward people tend to notice the parts that are working correctly, and they sort of gloss over minor functional faults. Away from folks cannot stop themselves from noticing what is not working correctly. So toward folks are best in design and production of products and services. And away from folks are best in maintenance and quality assurance tasks. Best practice is to put these two kinds of folks in tasks appropriate for how their brain works. And of course, many managers know this way of thinking about tasks and have the intention of finding folks for tasks based on their normal natural tendencies. But many other managers are not yet aware of these concepts about brain function and behavior and how these human tendencies affect their business success. I refer to toward and away from for these two types of folks. Most folks are either motivated to get to the proper solution toward or to avoid the impending failure away from. And of course, in your organization, there are tasks which specifically require one or the other of these performance capabilities. And when you're in a hiring or recruiting mode, you need to keep in mind which of these motivational tendencies you're searching for. Am I hiring for production or for quality assurance? But what about the other characteristics needed for that same task? In my process, in my model, toward and away from are two patterns in the category called motivation direction. My approach to hiring and management has a total of 55 patterns across 17 categories. And if you're going to hire the right person, you will have to be paying attention to many more factors. I know this sounds like a very complex approach, but it's really quite simple. I've developed an interview which gets people to reveal all of their patterns across those 17 categories. This interview takes around 10 to 12 minutes. And upon completion, you know all of this person's patterns. You can learn how to identify a person's patterns. But how do you know which are the patterns you need in the people you need to hire? Well, actually, this part's really simple. You use my interview and interview all of your best performers at a particular task and find out which patterns are common amongst those good performers. then you attract and hire more folks with those same kinds of patterns. Maybe you're asking yourself if it is possible for your best performers to have a common set of patterns. When you look at the patterns of your top performers, some of the patterns are not common across that whole group. Those common patterns simply show you which patterns are required for top level performance at this task. Those non-conforming patterns scattered around your top performers are simply indications of various individual uniqueness in that group. That group is not a bunch of robots, but each will tend to have those common necessary patterns for top level performance at that task, as well as personal uniqueness. If you also interview those who have not performed at top levels in that task, you can really start to understand more clearly that the common patterns of your top performers are what is required for top level performance in the task, because your less productive folks will have fewer of those common productive patterns. So when it is necessary to hire more folks for that task, for replacement or for expansion, you now have a standard showing you which patterns are needed for top level performance at that task in your organization. It becomes simply a follow the successful recipe situation. For each of these patterns in my system, there is language which motivates people with that pattern. So if you need to attract replacement or additional folks with that successful pattern set, you can describe the task, including those words and phrases that they are attracted to. And that description becomes very attractive to folks with those patterns. Deciding about candidates becomes easier because you know how to recognize matching candidates for the task. So finding replacements who have the needed patterns becomes easier. And because you know the motivating language of those with these patterns, it becomes even easier to get them to accept positions with you. You want to know how to hire the right person and avoid hiring the wrong person for the job. My approach does that. It teaches you how to recognize the thinking and behavior patterns of your top performers in a task. It teaches you how to attract and recognize applicants with those needed patterns. My approach is called the Language and Behavior Profile, the lab profile. You can do a LinkedIn search for the lab profile and find others teaching it. Those who are listed there learn from me or learn from others whom I have taught over the decades. These books were written about the lab profile, or they include chapters devoted to my patterns. These are a sample of organizations and companies which have brought me in for lab profile training or for consultations. To know more about the lab profile and how it can help you prevent hiring the wrong person, or how it can help you improve productivity in other ways, click the link in the description.